This is HuffPost Live. I'm Josh Sepps. If you do the crime, you do the time, after which you rejoin society as a citizen who's paid his debt. That's how justice works, right? Well, no, not really, not here, not mostly. Almost 3 million Americans are forbidden from voting, for example, because they've broken the law, even though they're no longer in jail. That's more people than live in all of New Mexico. And the US is joined by only 3 other advanced nations in doing this: Armenia, Belgium, and Chile. The US has by far the biggest prison population in the world, with more than 2.2 million people incarcerated. In fact, America has 4% of the world's people, but 25% of the world's inmates. To discuss this excluded subclass of people who live amongst us are Michelle Alexander, civil rights advocate and litigator, and author of New York Times bestselling book The New Jim Crow; Jeremiah Hancock, who was convicted of armed robbery at the age of 18 and served over 15 years in prison. He was released recently. And Daryl Atkinson, staff attorney at the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. He's also served 40 months in prison. Thanks for being with us, all of you. Michelle, let's just kick it off with you. The basic question here is, what does my democratic right to choose, for example, who represents me in Congress have to do with my having committed a crime that was put to rest years ago? What's the link?
Well, I think in a democracy, there should be none. In fact, for all of the talk about reforming felon disenfranchisement laws, I think we ought to be asking ourselves the question, why should anyone ever be deprived of the right to vote? You know, in many Western European democracies, people in prison have the right to vote. But here in the United States, not only do we strip people of the right to vote in prison, but we also ban them from the voting booth for months, years, or in some states for the rest of their life because they were once convicted of a felony. According to the U.S. Supreme Court, felon disenfranchisement is constitutional only if it's understood not to be punishment for a crime. But it is very difficult to imagine what other rationalization there could be for denying people the right to vote after they have been convicted of a crime. Simply because you have done wrong, even if it is a horrible wrong, does not mean that you are no longer a citizen and no longer a member of the democracy with the right to have some control over who your vote is cast in favor of, and to have the opportunity to participate in the democracy that you are a member of.
What is the rationale, do you think? Is it a moralistic one? Is it something along the lines of we live in a society of laws and there are certain obligations as well as certain rights, and once you breach that pact, that compact, I suppose, between yourself and the larger society, then you've abrogated your right to receive the benefits of being a member of a society? Is it that kind of lofty stuff, or are there specific reasons why they think that in a practical sense you should no longer be able to vote?
Well, I think many people have attempted to rationalize stripping people of the right to vote, along those lines, and the idea that, there is a social contract, and when you violate that social contract, you no longer have the right. You have forfeited your right to participate in our democracy. But, the U.S. Supreme Court has also made clear that voting is a fundamental right, one of the most fundamental rights that we possess. And I think in a democracy, you could argue that it is the most fundamental of rights, right up there with the right of free speech, in order for a democracy to be genuine. And once you start coming up with categories of offenses for which you no longer have the right to vote, it's a very slippery slope. I mean, once upon a time, the right to vote was denied only for, a relatively small category of crimes. But now today, anyone convicted of a felony in some states is denied the right to vote, including someone who's simply, convicted of felony possession of marijuana in some states may find that they, are stripped of the right to vote for a period of months, years, or depending on the state they live in, potentially the rest of their lives. And I think we ought to take democracy more seriously. If we want people who may have committed crimes to become serious upon their release about reintegrating into their society and being productive, caring members of society, well, then it makes no sense to make them feel as though they have no stake in that society at all and that their voice means nothing. And that is what we do in our country today. We send a message to people convicted of all kinds of crimes, but especially those convicted of felonies, that you no longer count. you have no voice, you have no worth. And not only are we not going to allow you to, find a job or get housing, or perhaps even food stamps, depending on the state that you're living in. Not only are we going to make it difficult to survive, but we're going to make it impossible for you to cast a vote and have any hope of changing the laws or the circumstances or the policies that are keeping you in this permanent second-class status. I think it's immoral and irrational, really, if what we want to do is create safer, more caring, compassionate communities.
You mentioned that it depends on what state you're in. It's a good point. Let's just take a look at a map of felony disenfranchisement, because obviously it differs from state to state. There are only 2 states, that's Vermont and Maine, in which felons never lose the right to vote. In 11 states, those are the ones in pink on this map, felons can be permanently prohibited from voting. How do these state differences break down, Michelle? It looks fairly predictable when you look at the fact that pink and orange are the harshest and blue and green are the least harsh.
No, I mean, I think it's no irony, actually, that, the states that are blue, where people who have, who never lose the right to vote, no matter what kind of crime they may have committed, are states that are overwhelmingly white. Felon disenfranchisement laws can be traced to our history of racial injustice in the United States. There's been a tremendous amount of research and a number of good books that have been published, documenting that felon disenfranchisement laws were passed in many southern states, right, at the same time that literacy tests were adopted to try to keep African Americans from the polls, and poll taxes were adopted. And we have given up those kinds of tactics, poll taxes and literacy tests, but felon disenfranchisement laws have lived on, and there has been, a continued effort to rationalize keeping out, some segment of our society from the polls, even when it has a racially disparate impact as a result of our incredibly biased drug war and escalation of mass incarceration through discriminatory police tactics and the like. We have held on to felon disenfranchisement, even though so many of the other barriers to voting that were struck down or abandoned as blatantly discriminatory have been abandoned.
Daryl, I want to bring you and Jeremiah into the conversation. You're an ex-felon, of course, who's turned his life around. What kind of restrictions do you continue to face despite no longer being in jail?
No, excellent question. And, for me, this question around voting is very up close and personal. So even though I've gotten my bachelor's degree, my law degree, I'm licensed to practice law in both Minnesota and North Carolina, I am permanently disenfranchised from the ability to vote in the state of Alabama, the state of my birth, because I was convicted of a crime that they designate as a crime of moral turpitude. One thing that I would highlight is that people in the formerly incarcerated community, we tend to shun terms like ex-felon, ex-offender, ex-convict, because they're labels that really describe conduct, not who we are as people. We're more than the sum total of some of our worst mistakes. We're fathers, we're husbands, we are community members, and we really encourage folks to use people language. So people who've been to prison or jail, people with criminal records, people with felony convictions, because the operative word is people, and it humanizes us and affirms our humanity, not just the crimes that we committed.
Good point. Jeremiah, you're only out of prison for a few months ago. How have you found it coming out?
Well, there are difficult aspects associated with it. There are stereotypes associated. I myself have also been educated, took great pains to, become more productive member of society as I integrate. But to become that productive member of society, again, as Michelle was speaking of, one of the most fundamental rights is voting, and to go and actually try to register to vote and was denied. And even when it's in this state of North Carolina with probation or parole, sometimes you find that people get 10, 15, 20 years probation just to avoid a sentence, whether they're guilty or not, and that immediately robs them and take them out of the voting equation. And it's challenging at times.
Have you felt that there's any actual level of support, that you have people who are rooting for you, who've got your back, who want you to become a productive part of society, who want you to succeed? Or do the doors just open and, well, there you are, you're out?
Nah. You have a little both. You have a lot of associations and organizations. You have a lot of individuals who are rooting for you, you know. And you have a lot of good people that have turned their lives around. Myself, I went in very young. I came out a different man. You're talking about back when I was 17 years old. I'm now 33. So I actually want to be a productive member of society. You know, be a pillar of my community, volunteer in the local activities of my local elections, local facilities, organizations, associations, as well as on a federal level. So there are people such as Daryl, who is on the front lines, such as Michelle and others involved, you know, trying to right some of the wrongs that have taken place.
I mean, a lot of this basically fundamentally comes down to the question of whether or not we actually care about rehabilitating people or just punishing them, right? And that vastly differs between different countries. America tends to have a pretty tough law and order outlook. There are other countries that have way more progressive views on justice. One example that leapt out to us is Norway. In Norway, even the worst offenders face a maximum of 21 years behind bars. Vice paid a visit to that country in 2011. Take a look at this.
So in Norway, there's no death penalty, and the maximum sentence is just 21 years. So the penal system here is all about rehabilitation.
One of the reasons why we have a prison like this is every inmate in Norway will be released. Someday he will be somebody's neighbor.
Right, that's an interesting way of looking at it.
We have a socializing training.
Preparing them to go back into society.
Compare that to one notorious American view on crime, the infamous attack ad that George H.W. Bush ran in 1988.
Bush and Dukakis on crime. Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
Take a look at a clip. I've got Rand Paul this week introducing a bill which would do just that. Take a look at him.
And whose brother 30 years ago grew marijuana plants in college. He made a mistake. He probably would tell you now it's a mistake. He still can't vote, and every time he goes to get a job, he has to check a box that says convicted felon. If we're the party of family values and keeping families together, and a party that believes in redemption and second chances, we should be for letting people have the right to vote back.
Well, of course, Michelle, the odds of the Republican Party embracing his proposals are 0, 0, 0, because 1 in 5 African Americans in Florida can't vote, and therefore, if you lose Florida, the Republicans would lose the presidency for the next century, probably. They're going to need Florida at some point. So, does this fundamentally come down to a kind of a crude political calculus about who should be part of choosing our leaders and who shouldn't?
Well, certainly crude politics comes into it. I mean, in fact, you know, if people who had been convicted of felonies in Florida had had the right to vote, Al Gore would have been elected president, and really the course of our nation's history would have been quite different than the way it unfolded. So there's no doubt that there's a political dimension to this, but I think it actually runs deeper than mere politics. I think at the core of this issue is the question of who belongs to America and who is counted as being part of us and part of them. How do we draw those lines? Who do we actually care about? And, you know, I think with felon disenfranchisement, as well as, you know, all these other forms of legal discrimination against people who've been convicted of crimes, you know, you can be legally discriminated against employment, in housing, and access to education, to basic public benefits, you know, all the old forms of discrimination that we supposedly left behind in the Jim Crow era are suddenly legal again today once you've been labeled a felon. So I think, you know, really, in order for us to deal with felon disenfranchisement, we also have to be honest about the racial politics and the racial history that brought us to this moment in time, and to recognize that fundamentally, we have denied the basic humanity of millions of people in this country and have denied them basic civil and political rights. One of the things that distinguishes us as a nation from a place like Norway, as well as many other European democracies that allow prisoners to vote and also place great emphasis on rehabilitation, is that in the United States, we don't recognize human rights as being enforceable. In this country, we recognize certain political rights, but in many European democracies, people understand that they have basic human rights, like the right to a quality education, the right to work, the right to housing, the right to basic public benefits, that not because you're a good person or even a hardworking person, but simply because you're a human being and part of our family, part of our society. We're going to ensure that your basic human needs are met. We don't have that kind of moral consensus here in the United States. And so it becomes easy for us to imagine that because you've committed a crime, whether it's a murder or whether you're caught with some drugs, that we can then strip you of basic civil and human rights, and you can struggle for mere survival for the rest of our lives, and we'll just shrug our shoulders at that, especially because the overwhelming majority who are targeted for inclusion in this system are impoverished, as well as folks of color. And, the man in the video that you showed who said, we understand that the people who are serving time in prison will one day be our neighbors. Well, many voters, who support kind of the Get Tough On movement don't imagine that people who are serving time in prison will ever be their neighbors, because our society is so segregated along the lines of race and class that we don't have that same sense of community and caring for those who find themselves behind bars today.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that, Michelle, that's absolutely right. The inequality, and both racial and class and economic inequality, have become so stark in this country that it's actually not true what the Norwegian guy said about American society. It's probably not true that someone who gets out of prison is going to move in next door to a family living in the suburbs with a double-car garage and so on, because our worlds don't intersect the way that they do in countries in Northern Europe. Daryl, I just want to get you in, but before we leave here, I want to read some comments from viewers as they watch this online. Kwai Chang says, Norway, Denmark and Sweden are some of the most civilized countries in the world. Boring File Clerk says, Norway treats them like human beings. What a concept. And whatever happened to paying your debt to society and moving on with life? Why can't we do that here in America? And Linda J says, if anyone knows how to do punishment, it's America. We are a vengeful nation. Do you think that's true, Daryl?
No, I think the viewers' comments are definitely on point, but I do want to kind of enter a vein of optimism, if you will.
Please.
We are at a moment in this country, mainly because of the economic downturn, and forced states to look long and hard about how much money they were spending on prisons and corrections in general. And so we've had a level of scrutiny in looking at our criminal justice system, and Michelle's book certainly contributed to that a great deal and was probably the catalyst for that, in addition to our economic straits. So people are looking long and hard about how we're spending our money right now. So it's an opportunity to really look deeply at folks' humanity, to look deeply that do we want to kind of permanently debilitate people and not allow them to participate in our economy? It was an economic think tank that did a study and said, by excluding people who've been to prison or jail and people with criminal histories from the mainstream economy, this country is losing between $50 and $65 billion a year. So hopefully that's a note that can resonate with folks who might not care about those issues. And then once we get them hooked in that way, potentially we can raise consciousness to get people to care about our shared humanity as a country, our collective health as an entire country, where all people can participate.
On that optimistic note, thanks to all five of you for being part of the conversation. It's fascinating stuff, and we'll certainly be keeping an eye on it. Stay tuned, of course, for plenty more conversations coming up right here on HuffPost Live.